Now, joining me on the big interview this week is a lady who's been a dancer, she's been a model, and now she's a bit of a fitness guru as well. Her new book is out now. It's called The Housework Workout, and Patience Bradley joins me in the studio. Hi, Patience.
Hiya.
So tell us about the new book. Last year you released the autobiography, Where Do You Go To, My Lovely? This year you've got the new book out, and this is something completely different, isn't it?
It is. Well, people, during a day, I would have at least 10 women, maybe an odd man, say, how do you keep so slim? Then the next thing is my nails and what have you, and it's an everyday thing. And I find that, you know, the real secret to keeping fit is not going to a gym. It's not spending lots of money on outfits. It's not going on a walk or in the gym, thinking of all the things you should be doing at home, or where you have to pick up the children, or what you have to do next. The real secret of being really as you want to be is, first of all, to love yourself. And I do think it's a shame that people cannot realize that being fit, being healthy, and being the size, I don't say the weight, I don't do anything on weight, but the size you want to be is so easy.
Yeah.
It's so easy, and it just starts by getting up in the morning and looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, I love you. Because unless you love yourself, number one, you can't love others, because you can't give out what you haven't got.
Yeah.
And number two, it's such a real shame. And this has been a real bugbear of mine for a long, long time. And you know, I say to women too, a lot come to me privately for slimming. And I'll say, you wouldn't go to your new baby and say, by the way, today we're having black coffee till 6 o'clock. I mean, would you do it to a dog? No. Would you do it to yourself? And a man's view on slimming is very different. He does really take the view. I mean, if you take in less calories and you're putting out the same amount of exercise, you will lose weight.
Yeah.
But if you go back to what you've been eating before you've taken out the few calories, you will not only go back to what you were. Every diet you put on 2 pounds.
Yeah.
I think it's all very psychological. I am a psychotherapist, and this book is very much put round, and it's taken all the little things that you do in the house. And people say, well, I don't like housework. It's not just a question of housework. It's a question of men cleaning their car. It's a question of cleaning the windows. It's a question of taking something you don't like, even cleaning your teeth, and taking that tiny minute just for yourself, pulling in your tummy. I have so many people have lost inches around their tummy with this simple little exercise. And you know, it's so simple.
Yeah.
I have a little tip in there whereby you just put a piece of string around your waist, and it's just as you're sitting now, okay? Put it on for 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, all you have to do is to push your tummy away from the string.
Right.
Every time it hits the string, you pull your tummy. People say, well, that's so easy. You try and do it. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy. So that's a good, hard one for women. But, you know, if you take anything that you're not so keen on doing in the house and make it into a workout, I say to people, you know, when you see something in the house that needs done, look at it. Have I time? If you have, do it. All right. If you haven't, write it down.
Yeah.
I'm a great believer in notes. I write down everything. I have about 4 notes for each day.
Right.
And I feel that is, you know, that is the secret. I say also, if you've got problems or if you've got things on your mind, put them on paper.
Yeah.
Because once they're out of there, you're in charge of them.
Yes.
You're in charge of that bit of paper. But while they're swimming around in your head, they take over.
Yeah.
And I do think, you know, and the other thing I think about, I'm very against dieting. That's why I wanted to put into this book, they're all simple little tips, and they do all work.
Were you always somebody who was very focused? Did you always write things down? Did you always live by that? Or is this something that's just happened in later years?
No. You see, I can't spell and I can't read.
Right.
I can't read my book. But anyway, not to worry, let other people do that. I was told at the age of 6, I can remember, my mother had a first class honours in English, and then she had me. She remembers sitting in her cot at 3 reading a book. So I was a bit of a, you know, little bit of a disappointment in that area. And she took me to the headmaster. And I could remember him sitting behind this big desk, and my mum and I were at the front, and he said, "Patience, you come over to me." And I was quite a tiny child. And he looked at me and he said, "Now you remember, Patience, you're not really stupid." Well, the really never stuck, the stupid did.
Yes, yeah.
I always went through school thinking I was stupid. So I decided I would always sit with the teacher,
Right.
which I did. And yes, and then I had a gang of little boys. And finally, this one, I remember he sat beside me, he was called Clark Addy, I will never forget him. He stood up one day because a few things had been done to teachers. And he stood up one day and they said they couldn't continue on with this. They had to get to the bottom of who was behind all this. And he stood up, he said, "Patience." And the teachers, I'll never forget, she said, "How could you? How, Clark, this little innocent girl here," and you know, they got told off again for something. But no, I went through life very lucky with my mother and people who could write. I have found that since I've got much older, especially just at this point in my life, my dyslexia is very bad again. I did a degree in psychotherapy with no writing. Right. And they sent somebody down. The last case studies had to be written. And I said, "Well, you'll not be able to read them.
Yeah.
They'll be illegible."
Yes, yeah.
So this guy came down, I'll never forget, and he was quite a surly looking chap, you know, and he came in and he sat down at my table and he said, "Mrs. Bradley," he said, "these are illegible.
Yeah.
We can't." I said, "Well, I did say that."
Yes.
So he said, "Listen," he said, "there were 5 case studies, shall we go through them?" And he was very nice, ended up, and he went through them with me, and I got very good marks. And as he was going out, he said, "Have you ever seen about your dyslexia?" And he sent me down to, beside Inst, there's a place for adult learning. Anyway, I went to a lovely lady, Ruth Bingham, and she helped me, but she was very wise. She said, "At your age now, really to have the ability to work with it rather than to even think about curing, because you can't." Certain things really stuck with me. Mm-hmm. The first thing she told me was shell, S-H-E-L-L, and I can remember that word. I mean, I could spell your name, for instance. And I have got the most amazing memory. And anyway, with the dyslexia, I always, all my life, had my notes, which was your question about 5 minutes ago. Yes, I've always written down. I can't, 9 times out of 10, distinguish what I've written.
Yes, yeah.
But I do know, and I've notes everywhere. I mean, I think it's very, very good to be open about things. Yeah. What I do is I say immediately if I'm on the phone, "You'll have to forgive me, I'm dyslexic." Now, I am so bad, I can't even copy. You know, if I have, say, 5 letters, I couldn't copy those 5 letters without holding on to each letter. And even then, I could end up with 5 letters being all the same.
Right,
you know?
yes,
So I am pretty bad. They tried with colour, they've tried with a lot of things, but I find it easier now just to say to people, you know, and as I say, I do have this amazing memory. And I never realised, it must have been about 20 years ago, I was having a conversation one night and we were talking about dreaming. And I said, "It's lovely the way you can go back to a person," and this sort of came around, you know, go back. Well, I can dream the same dream for about 3 or 4 nights.
Really?
Yes, I could dream about you and I'd say, "Bye, Robin, see you tonight." Seriously, I thought everybody could do that.
No, wow.
You know, and another thing I have, which is very amazing, we have one of our rooms, our dining rooms, we have a church pew from Downpatrick Cathedral. And I went down and I knew the area that I was going to put it in. And I said, "Yes, that'll be all right." And they came up with it, and I remember the men coming in and they said, "That's not going to go in there." I said, "Yes." They said, "There's no way that's going to go in." And literally, I mean, there's that either side.
Oh, wow.
You know, I would be a very good parker. I can park my car in the length of my car, you know.
Yeah. I suppose taking you back to your days as a model, you must have been in that world with a lot of bitchiness.
I went into that world by total accident.
You were 14, weren't you, when you
Yes.
got your big break?
I'd gone, funnily enough, to a lady over here. In fact, funny enough, I believe she has since died. I was speaking to somebody who was a friend of hers only the other day, which is amazing. And she actually remembered me.
Right.
And my mother took me to this. She had a 12-week modelling course in Northern Ireland. We were here for the summer. And after 6 weeks, she said to my mother, she'll never make a model. She's far too tiny. And no, and she was kind because she didn't take all the money off my mum. She could have easily said, just continue.
Yeah.
So I went back to horses, never thought. I think my mother, I was a very good dancer. And I got a scholarship to the Royal Ballet when I was 12.
Wow.
Ironically, they thought I would be too tall.
Right,
Isn't that
okay,
funny?
yes, yeah.
But I never would have made it. I mean, never. The discipline would have been.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went back, and this chap, out of the blue, had a phone call saying, would we go to Dublin? We were actually back in England, go to Dublin. He would pay. He wanted to do some shots. I mean, it was so surreal that I think my mother thought, you know, this really can't be happening. And what would somebody want to photograph you for anyway? I mean, you've no figure. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah.
So anyhow, down we went. He was Italian. And one of his photographs was seen by somebody, and I went straight to the top. And I think because my father died when I was very young, so I was I ruled my mother, a very spoiled child. But I did do a lot that a 12, 13-year-old probably wouldn't be doing. I mean, I sort of did after the money and things like that. And because of that fact, to be taken straight to the top was very, very odd. But I always had quite an opinion of myself, so I never really worried too much about other people. And to be honest, I never really worked with that many girls for second times and things.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I went to see she'd been the head of Vogue or whatever. And she said, she said, it's a shame about your skin, but we can do something about that with makeup. Bear in mind, I was 14.
Yes, yeah.
And she said, hair's not good either, but it's lucky we have a lot of wigs. We always use wigs, as are, but I may still are. But she, I remember her saying, thinking, it's a bit odd. And it always stuck with me.
Yeah.
And she said, you can never be too thin. I remember that being said, and I thought, that's a strange thing. Yeah. Never be too thin. And I realized with the fashion industry, of course they want you thin, because they just want material to drape, no bumps, no anything, you know? So, but I was there a week when there was a party full of drugs. I mean, the thing, I never even realized the smell.
Right,
I didn't realize the smell of drugs. I thought, it's awfully funny smell in this flat. But anyway, this chap was on the settee, was sort of lying on the settee, and everybody else was, I was fascinated with this. And in some ways, I can't say I would, but I can't say I wouldn't have tried. But he died on the settee with me there. Now, he was the same age as me. And I thought, you know, this chap's ill, and I couldn't get anybody at that party to register, to be, and I thought, that's pretty grim. I never touched them.
London was a pretty exciting place at that time, wasn't it?
Oh, it was. I mean, it was just, you know, one of the things I don't think will ever leave me, Robin, it's dreadful, and I do it all the time, I don't queue. You know, when I go to a supermarket.
Yes, yeah.
And there's somebody in front of me, no, I go in front of them.
Right.
I'm dreadful. I don't, you know, the other day I was in Marks getting one of their £10 deals. And this chap, now he didn't have a tremendous one, but he had quite a lot and a deal, you know. So I did my usual, went round, you know. I said, I'm so sorry. Oh no, he said, that's perfectly all right. Let this lady through first. Luckily he hadn't started going through.
Yeah.
But, no, it's amazing how people put up with me doing this. And it's the one thing I haven't really hasn't left me. I never queued, you see, for anything. When I used to go to London all the time, backwards and forwards, it was in the Troubles.
Yes.
And you used to queue outside. I used to see these poor people queuing.
Yes.
I never queued.
No.
Never queued. So, you know, and there was always a car there. And I think the excitement, which the books have brought back in a nice way, but this time in a very levelled way. You know, I would have a telephone call maybe on a Sunday night, say I was going somewhere Monday morning. Yeah. It was as quick as that.
Yes, yeah.
But everything was done. I mean, I didn't have to do anything.
Wow.
You know, so that was nice. And I did meet some amazing people.
Let's talk about some of those amazing people. You know, there was Richard Burton, there was the late great Oliver Reed. Tell us about Oliver Reed, your first meeting with him.
Well, Oliver Reed, it was a shame because he was one of the first big personalities. I'd met quite a few. And I had bought this little bunny coat in the then C&A store, which is no more. And it was age 11 to 12, but it did me as a mini.
Right,
and I
yes,
thought
yeah.
I was wonderful in this. In fact, I think I got it with my first money. I can't remember, but I did feel very good. And the friends that were taking me, you know, I couldn't believe all day, I'm going to be in the room with Oliver Reed. And at that time, you know, he was quite well known for all his, well, for all that he was. And anyway, I can remember so well thinking, as the time got nearer and nearer, you know, there was me. So anyway, they electric gates, I remember, we got up to the door and we went in and I came in last. And he looked at me on the step of his house and he said, "Do you often wear dead rats?" To a child of 14. And I thought, this is Oliver Reed. So I said nothing. I went in, and there were other people there, and he had one of those leather chairs that was sort of studded. Do you remember, sort of came out at the side?
Yes, yeah.
And the two bits down there were just complete cigarette butts.
All right, yes.
Where he'd put out cigarettes right the way down. I was fascinated with that. So I talked and everybody else talked, and I just stayed in my little world looking. I just couldn't believe it and watched him. And another couple of quite famous people there, but he did sort of, you know, he did hold his own.
Yeah, oh wow.
So I had read, this was way, way before, that he'd gone into horses. And of course I did know quite a lot about horses. And I stood up and I said, "I believe you have horses," to which he stood up, and although he wasn't terribly tall, he was a lot taller than me, and he walked towards me as I kind of backed down into my chair again, and he said, "Don't ever mention horses to me."
Right.
So that was the end of our conversation. That was Oliver Reed. The other, Richard Burton, was on his own. He was just charming. I mean, I suppose being so young, he was a daddy I never had, and he was just lovely.
And you lived with his niece for a while, didn't you?
Yes. And his house, he bought a house in this road, and he bought the next house to it because it was on the corner when it came up. The whole house was white. Elizabeth Taylor wanted it all white. White furniture, white everything. And there was a room that she'd actually gone a bit doolally in. I mean, they had tempers that, I mean, they couldn't live together.
No.
They phoned each other every day of their life, even though they were married to other people.
Right,
Not a lot of many people know that.
No.
And he'd brought his aunt Izzy or somebody from Pontryfen, that he'd brought her up from Wales, and he got her a little house on the other side of the road. The only when they were together, they just spoke Welsh all the time. Went into Welsh. That would be the only. But Elizabeth Taylor, I saw at Rich's 50th birthday party, and it was at the awards. Hence back to Oliver Reed, which would have been my first meeting with Oliver Reed would have been maybe March, not the next October, but the October round from that. So that's a year and a half on.
Yes.
Where patients who thought she was a little girl, you know, sort of not. Thought she was above everybody. Yeah. I mean, I had gone from Oliver Reed was nobody in my eyes then. So Elizabeth Taylor, first of all, she was stunning, very tiny, but stunning looking. And we were coming out to go to the after show party, and we were walking along the front of the stage sort of bit, and I heard this name, Patience. And I turned around, it was Oliver Reed. He'd actually given an award, which he was quite doolally giving. And he said, I owe you an apology. And I
Right.
said, I think you do. I said, for quite a few things. So by that time I was well. So he said that, first of all, he said, you know, about when you came first, I didn't realise, you just come up, blah, blah, blah. Then he said that, which was awful, vandals had got in, and he had a brood mare and a foal at foot, and they'd stabbed them. And this was just when I said,
yes.
so, but I said to him, it was no excuse.
No.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And that was okay. One of people that I admire most of all the people I've met is Christopher Reeve.
Yeah.
Oh, he was...
Did you know Christopher before the accident?
Just, yes,
yeah.
yes. And he was just the same after. He was just the same. And my lasting memory was of him with his little boy. And he was all chewed up, you know, he was completely, had to actually be tied in. But what got me about him was he was no different.
Yeah.
You know, there was no sorry for him. And the little boy came over, you know, to be lifted up type of thing. Now he said, you know, you have to get up yourself, you know, and he loved his daddy.
Yeah.
And it was just little things like that. But he was a lovely man, a lovely man.
The sad thing was for the fans as well, who knew him as Superman, to then see this horrendous, tragic thing happen to him as well.
Well, to me, he was more Superman then.
Yeah.
Yes, he was lovely.
With all your success and all the modelling success, and with a lot of models, then comes the eating disorders and stuff like that. It happened to you as well, didn't it?
It did. But I don't know whether, to be honest, what I could put down to it. I think, obviously, you were pushed to this. You cannot be fat. There is a complete difference between an eating disorder and being slim. An eating disorder is a very evil illness. It's a guilt-ridden illness. It involves lying, it involves stealing, and the thing about anorexia is it always goes on to bulimia.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realise this, but the body is made to survive. That's why the workout book is so good, because you can eat what you want and still be slim.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, I never used being sick. I never made myself sick, ever. But I would have used laxatives. And I mean, equally bad, and has given health problems. I mean, it's not good. So I'm very, very keen. And again, I have to say this. I'm very surprised. I've worked with the Priory Clinic. When my first book came out, I was very ashamed of it, and I was doing a fashion talk. So just had the first book, and I mentioned it very, very slightly. I felt so ashamed. Nobody's going to speak to me again. And this lady came up to me afterwards, and she said, Patience, would I be able to get one of those books? And I said, no problem at all. She said, my daughter died last week, age 24. She was married 3 months in the Priory. And I signed it for her, and I gave her that one with my telephone number. And a week later, she phoned me up, and she said, you know, if I'd had that book, she said it would have helped so much, because it was pure honesty. The spelling mistakes in it, I wanted as it was. It's unreadable. I mean, you'd think a 5-year-old, in fact, I think many people have said that, had written it, but that's what I wanted. And there's nowhere you wouldn't open that book that you wouldn't get help.
Yeah.
Do you know, a very dear friend of mine died 2 years ago of cancer. She was the first person I ever said the word anorexia. It never came out of my mouth till then. And she blased it, just we were driving along. She said all models are anorexic, and left it at that. I gave her a book, and she said, Patience, she said, this is like a Bible. That is a Bible for anorexics. And it is something I would love to do, but where my gripe is in it, especially over here, might I say, I did an interview from London with a lady from one of the, I'm not saying which one of the eating disorders places in Northern Ireland. And I said I'd been with a little girl of 6. And she tore me off a strip, saying that there would never be a child of 6 in Northern Ireland that would ever have anything like that. Proved wrong.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't want me to help them. I've offered. But people over here, there's a great saying to be a big fish in a small pond, or be a very tiny fish in a big pond.
Yes.
Some people prefer that. That's up to them. But I do think when an illness is at stake and I know I can help, I think that's wrong, no matter who I am.
You've been through so much in your life, but yet you keep going and you keep reinventing yourself in different ways all the time. Where does the drive come from? What is it that keeps you doing this?
It's interesting you saying that about reinventing myself. That is, I've never had that said before, ever. Ever. That's the first.
But you have, you know,
I
from
have.
modelling to dancing to being a best-selling author to doing your charity work to being a psychotherapist to doing all that. That was reinvention.
Well, it is. I do have a lot of things I do. I'm not saying I do any of them very well, but I do have, do you know what I mean? I could turn to nearly everything. And what I found recently is, all these things that I have, I've been kind of picking them out and saying, I think I'll do better in that. I think I'll take that a step further. And that has been really good. And funny enough, I'm thinking about a tattoo. I'm glad in a way I never thought of getting tattoos when I was younger, because I think I'd be covered in them. I think they're very addictive. Yeah. But I'd thought of this one because I wanted my mummy's ashes in a tattoo, and I found somebody who'd do it. And my husband and my symbol are two hearts interlinked, patience, kisses, Ivor.
Oh, wow.
So I also have it on the car, I have it everywhere, and he has it too, tattooed. So I also have Patience Kisses Mum on my second car. So I have the M is where the ashes are of my mother. And then I wanted it bigger. Originally I had it small so I could cover it up. And then I thought, what's the point of having a tattoo? I really loved it. So I made it bigger. So they're now in God's hands. And only yesterday I've decided to get another one. I think tattoos are tremendously personal. I think they have to be right. You know, they have to be right.
So we got nearly through the whole interview without talking about the dogs. Your dogs are so important in your life, aren't they?
Well, they are. They are. Yes. I have Chihuahuas, and I think I have the first Chihuahua really to do agility in the World Championship. I'll never forget. My trainer very kindly let me carry the Ulster flag, and it was a huge arena with all the rest of us. All you do, you have all the countries coming in and each one has their flag, and all the people looking down from the stands to see where my dog was, you know. This little thing, whereas all the collies and the labs and all the bigger dogs were coming. I'm very proud of that. I think I brought in that, you know, Chihuahuas are not just a little dog you dress up. Well, any dog is what you make it, you know, anyway, but they're my life. I do a lot with all of them. I do something with all of them.
Yeah. Just to finish off, are you an ambitious person? Is there still ambitions left in you?
Yes, I am ambitious. And I remember I read Hands. My mother read Hands. My mother was phenomenal. And I won't tell you the story, but I don't believe in it. And that's how ironic it is.
Okay.
But this chap read my cards one day. And he said to me, I was worried about my mum. And he said, "You're worried about your mum?" He said, "There's no worries." He said, "Somebody's coming back into her life." She was on Mastermind, very clever. And an ex-fiance got in touch after this reading of these cards. I mean, it really was amazing. He said, "You'll be married 3 times. And he said, you will end up doing something that is totally alien to you." And of course, that would be writing. I mean, I have a wonderful publicist in Tina Calder. I mean, she is amazing. I mean, she really, really is. She just has this niche of knowing. And she and I know, it's not just the books, it's what's coming out of the books. And I just know where I'm going with each thing, you know.
Great stuff. Patience, it has been brilliant talking to you.
Thank you.
And the new book, the Housework Workout, is out now.
Yes.
Great stuff, Patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much.